Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. September, a school month is already gone by. I can't believe how fast it's gone. And we are into our October events. And October is always a pretty special time because we like to bring in a lot of space exploration events. So we like to, of course, host some astronauts, but we really like to bring in as well the engineers and the scientists working behind the scenes to make these incredible missions happen, help us understand our Earth, our solar system, our galaxy, and out into our universe. So we have an amazing month of live events coming up. Do head over to our website, exploringbytheseat.com, and you can find the full listing of October events and register live with your classrooms. And this is actually our first space-themed event of the month, and I really can't think of a better person to have joining us. We have Nicole Stott joining us, and she has explored from the heights of outer space to the depths of our oceans. She's a veteran NASA astronaut. Her experience includes 2 space flights and 104 days living and working in space on both the Space Shuttle and the International Space Station. So Nicole is also an artist. She combines her artwork and spaceflight experience to inspire creative thinking about solutions to our planetary challenges and to raise awareness about the surprising interplay between science and art. She's also the founder of the Space for Art Foundation. So I'm going to head to Florida now and bring Nicole in live with us. Hey, Nicole, how you doing?
Hi, Joe. Great to be here.
All right. Well, great to steal some of your time as always. We have an awesome group of classrooms joining us across North America. Some are in camera spots. Others are tuning in via YouTube. Some of them are saying hi right now in Ontario and Sudbury and New Jersey and Perry Sound. Indiana. So we've got a great crew hanging out with us today.
Nice.
All right. Well, I'm going to let you take over. Take us into your world, and then we'll do a little action.
All right. I'm going to, let's see if I can, if we made it work here, Joe, with the share screen. It's, you know what, I'm just going to say, first of all, before I go to my slides, which I'll try to run through quickly because I think the best part of this is engaging with you guys with the questions and answers. But I am always so excited when Joe invites me to support the Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants events, because I love that there's time for focus on what we do in space and how that all comes back to Earth to help improve life here. But also, I think it's just such, exploring by the seat of your pants. It's exactly what we do, even if we're, experienced explorers or we're going off on our first adventure. Really, there's a lot of by the seat of your pants going along with that. And a lot of that, which I hope to talk about today, has to do with really the awe and wonder that surrounds us and being surprised by that, and how being curious and wanting to learn more really opens up these new worlds of exploration for us. So let me see if I can get my slides to work. Is that working, Joe?
You got it. Looks good.
All right. Okay. So I thought I'd take it. I'm going to show you a little bit about being in space, but I wanted to put a little different twist on it today and think about this from the standpoint, especially not just in space, but exploring in general, how we take our humanity with us no matter where we go. And so my little topic or theme today is the human in human spaceflight. And I'll just point out that one little picture in the bottom right there. I love this picture. It reminds me of being in space. It's, you can see that little silhouetted space shuttle there. That was my ride home after my first flight in space, which was a little over 3 months on the International Space Station. And it looks like we're just hanging there still. And yet I know that we're traveling at 17,500 miles an hour, which is about 5 miles a second, which is super fast, which means that we orbit the Earth every 90 minutes. And every 45 minutes or so, we get one of these stunning sunrises or sunsets out the window. And I know I'm inside there with my 6 crewmates on our way home after a successful mission, and that my friend and crewmate Jeff is on the space station. He's still got a month or so to go up there, and he took this really awesome picture for us to remember the experience by. So very, very thankful for that. Now, where I went both times that I traveled to space was to the International Space Station. And I hope you all know about the International Space Station. And if you haven't already checked it out, I hope you'll go look online. There's a place called Spot the Station, and you can put your zip code or your city name in there, and it will tell you when the space station is flying overhead where you live. And it gives you every detail, which way to look in the night sky, how to watch it track across the sky, and where it's going to kind of go down around the horizon. And it's just cool to think about this spaceship that, if you laid it on the ground, is bigger than a football field. But when you're looking at it in that night sky, it's like this gorgeous glowing dot of light just moving across the sky. And to consider the fact that there are 6 or 7 people there representing 15 different countries from around the world, this amazing international partnership where everything we're doing there is off the Earth for the Earth. So what we do in space is all about improving life on Earth. And we are definitely exploring while we're in this place. We're living off the grid. And I think the best example of living off the grid you can find. And we're working together there like crewmates, which I think is just such an amazing example for how we should be living like crewmates down here on Spaceship Earth. Now, we build that machine, that big spaceship, right? Because we want to take people to space, and we want to be able to do all the kinds of things like build spacecraft, operate them, do spacewalks, do robotics, and most importantly, do the science that we have there. But in order to do that, that place has to keep us alive. So that big machine I showed you in the last picture is essentially our life support system. And it's helping us mimic as best we can what Earth does for us naturally. So as a crew of human beings, like you see in this picture, every day when we're on that spaceship, we have to be working together. We need to be enjoying our time together, which I think you can see here. The best crews enjoy their time together. We're excited about the work that we're doing. But also, we know that we have each other's backs when things don't go, exactly as planned. And that's also the best kind of crew to be a part of, that you'll take care of each other. And I trusted all of these people to do that for me. And so part of that meant that every day when we got up in the morning, we were paying attention to how much carbon dioxide is in our atmosphere, how much clean drinking water we have, the integrity of our thin metal hull, and absolutely the health and well-being of all of our crewmates, because we knew we had to do that to be able to survive on that mechanical life support system. And I would argue again, you'll hear me say this a couple times, that by behaving like a crew that can work peacefully and successfully together like this, we can bring that back to Earth and behave just like that down here on Spaceship Earth. So we go to these places in space primarily to do science. And one of the coolest things about being on the space station in that environment is that you're floating. Everything floats. You're in this microgravity place. And so everything behaves a little bit differently. And because we can take gravity out of the equation of what we're experiencing there, excuse me, the scientists love it because they can look at things in a whole new way. Just like this ball of water, they can see things about how water behaves and how everything else, including us and our bodies, behave in this environment, and learn all kinds of new important things about it, and then bring that back to Earth to help improve life here for all of us. Now, when you talk about exploring, a lot of that is how we as the human interact with the environment around us. And certainly there's the floating part of being in space. There's the being able to fly and do all these kinds of experiments in a different way and work together as this international crew. But I think every form of exploration that I can think of from a human standpoint involves the human interacting with that environment in whatever way they can. And one of the greatest ways that we have the opportunity to explore and interact with our environment is through the windows of our spaceship, and to be able to look back at Earth in a whole new way, to see it from a whole new perspective, from that very special vantage point, to appreciate the beauty in all of these colors that we know Earth to be, but to be seeing it in this glowing, iridescent, as a planet. Like, holy moly, we live on a planet when we look out that window. And to appreciate our home that way is a really special opportunity. Now, I got to space, and I'm in Florida right now. And when I got to space, I wanted to see Florida from space. I think no matter where we go as humans, we want to look for what's familiar around us too, right? And all of this new and awesome stuff that we're exposed to, we want to see and find what's familiar to us too. And Florida was certainly that place for me. There's no denying Florida when you look at it from space, that really beautiful peninsula sticking out from the continental United States there, just gorgeous. And there was, for me, kind of an evolution. And I've talked to other people, Joe, I wonder if the same thing happens for you when you're out in a new place and you're exploring and discovering new things, how the way you look at it evolves and how you just immerse yourself in the beauty, the awe and the wonder that is surrounding you, and just appreciate the surprises that are being presented to you. And I did that every time I looked out the window. It was so cool to see things like this little naturally heart-shaped island pop up into the view of my, big zoom lens on the end of my camera. And to know that that was just there on this planet that's our home. And to think about it in a way like, man, I think that little place is there with that shape that's so familiar to me, so that I'll recognize it, so that I'll want to discover more about it. I want to learn about the people that live there and how everyone, lives on the planet there compared to how I might live in Florida, and have some appreciation for that and really just be surprised. And I can tell you that every time I looked out the window, there was a surprise. We're very fortunate on the space station to be able to very easily use these really large zoom lenses to, really peek in close to these beautiful pieces that kind of jump out of the planet. And because these big lenses don't weigh anything, so it's easy to move them around and hold them and take these pictures. And I loved finding these places. And this was my very favorite picture that I took from space. When I looked down through the window and saw this down on Earth, I was like, man, it looks like somebody had reached down with a big paintbrush and painted a wave on the ocean. And ever since seeing this picture, it has been an inspiration for me. And it was an inspiration in space. I had the opportunity to paint with watercolors while I was in space. This is the picture I chose to paint while I was there. You can see my little paint kit, that white box up on the wall. And I'm holding a paintbrush and holding the paper and the picture in my hand. And my feet are strapped into a little, like what we call handrail, but they're really like foot rails, because that's what we're, holding on with all the time. And just to be able to paint in space with floating balls of water instead of dipping into a cup of water, and just, experiencing that in a whole new way. And as you can imagine, you're not going to be like floating in front of the window painting what you see out the window, because at 5 miles a second or 17,500 miles an hour, what you want to paint is going to be gone before you probably can even get the brush to the paper. So I printed out a picture of it on scrap paper up there and was able to paint that way. But I love it because since the beginning of humans traveling to space, the human has been very thoughtful about where they're going to be and what opportunities they might have there, and how that we can take our humanity with us. And this is Alexei Leonov. He was one of the earliest cosmonauts. He's also an artist. So art has been in space since the very beginning. He very purposefully brought up these colored pencils and ended up sketching orbital sunrises and sunsets from out the window, like I showed you in that very first picture. And he also was the commander on an historic, I would say iconic mission of peace, where the Soviets and the US came together in space on the Apollo-Soyuz mission back in the 70s. And Alexei used pencils to sketch all portraits of all of the US and Russian crewmates on board that mission. And that picture that he's holding in his hand is one he did of the US commander, Tom Stafford. And it's still over Tom's fireplace in his home. And those two people were friends for the rest of their lives. Incredible the way that relationship went. Looking out the window, that inspiration of looking out the window, the creativity comes. Don Pettit, another US astronaut, he was the most creative, is the most creative with cameras in space. He started really creatively doing things like these, time lapse, star trail images. There's been music in space from the very beginning. And Kjell Lindgren, who's up on the space station again now, when he flew the first time, he brought bagpipes to space with him. and actually ended up playing Amazing Grace for an unexpected friend's funeral down on the ground. I mean, how special would that be? To have brought this instrument with you just to kind of play around with it, and then to be able to interact with your family and friends that way, in such a special way, from space. There's jam sessions going on all the time on the space station. People are even improvising. You can see Ricky Arnold in the corner there with a little bongo drum, which just happens to be what I hope is an empty solid waste container from our toilet facility. But we have to get creative sometimes with how we do things up there. Even now, with the new missions going on, with Dragon capsules flying people to space and some of the commercial activities happening, art and our humanity are being pulled in very thoughtfully into these missions. And so you can see some of that that's gone on with some of the recent, like the Inspiration 4 mission and Axiom 1 space, integrated art into their missions very thoughtfully. And then when we come back, you know, a lot of astronauts have, while they might not have done art in space, when they got back to Earth, they used art as their way to communicate the experience they had. My very favorite was Alan Bean. He was the 4th person to walk on the moon as part of Apollo 12. And when he came back from space and retired from NASA, he used art as his way to share that experience. And people like Michael Collins from Apollo 11, who was circling the moon while Buzz and Neil were walking on it, he paints. Al Warden, who did the farthest off in deep space spacewalk that's ever been done, used poetry to share his experience from space. And even folks, scientists that help us get to space. Robert Goddard, the US father of rocketry, was an artist, and it's said that where he got some of his best ideas while he was painting out, like in the New Mexico landscape. And we credit him with why we're able to get to space, and art was a really inspirational thing for him. And my friend Karen Nyberg, an astronaut in my astronaut class who recently retired, she quilted and sewed while she was in space. And now that she's back on Earth and retired from NASA, she's taking that inspiration and using it to create fabrics and patterns for other people to take those views from space and make their own artwork. And I also, from that time of painting in space, felt like art was the best way for me to really bring that story of all of what we're doing in space that's about improving life on Earth back to Earth and engaging with kids all over the world. And this is just a little 1-minute video to show you. And I've got this spacesuit behind me you might have seen, working with kids all over the world. Our motto is that we are uniting a planetary community of children through the awe and wonder of space exploration and the healing power of art. So basically space-themed art therapy projects. And we collect this artwork from kids in hospitals and refugee centers and orphanages and other places around the world. And ILC Dover, the company that made my suit that I got to do a spacewalk in, they quilted all together into these suit covers. And we've even had the chance to send a couple to space for the kids to see, and done video conferences with them in the mission control centers around the world, and piped into the hospitals and places. And for them to see their art come together as something bigger and beautiful like this has been really, I feel like I'm on my next mission, was to be part of these projects. And our hope through this is that as we continue to explore, just as exploration equipment down here on Earth has gotten to where we can be a little bit more creative with it, where there's some beauty brought into the utility as well, we're hoping that in the future, spacesuits can all be a little bit more artsy than they are right now. And I tell you, we think about, we're going back to the moon soon with people. We are exploring out in our solar system with these robotic missions. And even on those missions, we're always looking for this connection back to home. And this is a picture from Saturn. You see those iconic rings of Saturn, and the Cassini mission, where we learned all kinds of things about Saturn. But that little dot of light down below the rings, that's us. And in every one of these explorations, we're always looking back to find ourselves, to find the connection to ourselves in all of it. And I think that's really important. I think that will continue no matter where we go. And even we look back again at the planet, we're looking for that connection to who and where we are in space. And here's another picture of Florida from space, kind of jutting in from the right side of the picture. And I think when you look at this, there's no denying that we live on a planet. And I will just close by saying, again, we live on a planet and we are all Earthlings. And if we think about it, the reality of it all is that the only border that matters is that thin blue line of atmosphere that blankets and protects us all. And by behaving like crewmates, not passengers, we really do have the power to create a future for all life on Earth that's as beautiful as it looks from space. All right, now I'll hush, and I'm looking forward to the questions.
All right. Awesome, Nicole. What a great presentation. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
And I'm going to jump into a quick question right here before we jump to a Kahoot activity.
Ooh.
Someone was wondering online, that suit behind you, has that one been to space?
This one has not been to space. And sadly, it's because it got built in a way that the upper part of it is really stiff. And so there was no way that we'd be able to get it packed up small enough to get it to space. But we built another suit recently. Last year, I guess, is when it was finished. And we built it as the ambassador for Spaceship Earth. And really with this storytelling of this connection between personal and planetary health. And its name is Beyond. And it actually got to go and spend some time at COP26, or the UN Climate Change Conference in Glasgow, and was this representative for planet Earth. And we've got our fingers crossed that we can get Beyond flown to space. But we can never promise that anything will fly to space. We try really hard, but, you know, I'm kind of hoping I get to go again, too.
All right. Well, Nicole, before we jump into some questions, I made a little Kahoot quiz behind the scenes for students. We'll get a little interaction going. So if those in the classrooms want to head to kahoot.it, it's going to ask you for a PIN number, which I'm going to share my screen in just a moment, and you'll see that PIN number. Now, if you don't have one-to-one devices, maybe your teacher can pop it up on the screen and you can shout out your answers, and we'll see what happens here. So let me get that share screen going. We'll do a Chrome tab. Here's the one I want. All right, so there is your PIN number as well. So kahoot.it, it'll ask you for a PIN number, 225-9030. Or if your tablet or phone, you can just scan that little QR code. We'll see if we have some players come in and join us today, and then we will jump into the quiz before a little Q&A action. So again, if you are joining one-to-one tech, you can jump in that way, or you can join and shout out from the front of your classrooms. All right. It's really quiet in the Kahoot. Usually we have tons of classrooms joining, so I'm wondering if maybe it didn't load properly. So I'm going to try and reload it with a different pin. Just bear with me for 1 second. We'll try and quickly reload the Kahoot and see if that's why no one's jumping in with us yet. Just give me 1 sec.
Okay. You're worried about how difficult your questions are going to be.
No. So Kahoot.it, and I'm going to share my screen with a brand new pin here, and let's see if we can get some classrooms in here with us. Otherwise, we'll just play and have the answer shout out. But usually we have quite a few students join us for the Kahoot. So I'm wondering if maybe it wasn't saved properly, so people couldn't join. So there it is, Kahoot.it, game pin 995760. And let's see if we get a few players come in and join us. All right. Well, Nicole, maybe it's just that our crew doesn't have one-to-one tech, so they're not able to come in and join us. It just might be the luck of the draw today. But all right, we will.
Yeah, and I'm seeing a couple. It looks like there's a few people that it won't.
It's not loading.
do with the name thing. Yeah.
Maybe there's something wrong. Yeah, I see lots of comments on maybe something's up with Kahoot today, because usually it generates their own. I see them talking about nicknames. It usually generates nicknames for people. Let me just jump into the settings here really quickly and see what it's doing today. Allow duplication. Because we do have players. I see that people would like to jump in and play, but there seems to be something up with Kahoot today. Let me try one more thing to see if I can get this going under our account settings. And if not, then we just might have to let the Kahoot slide today. That would be a bummer.
It is always fun to see.
Yeah. Get to our home page. Yeah, the settings turned on for to automatically pick nicknames. Okay, we're just gonna have to. Darn, Kahoot. Okay, well, we're out of luck for today. Sorry, boys and girls. I know the Kahoot's a lot of fun. I'm gonna share the Kahoot, a different link for it in the chat, and then your classrooms can play it afterwards. You can play it right in your classroom and compete against each other. So you're still gonna get to play it, but for whatever reason today, it just doesn't seem to be cooperating with us. Sorry, guys. Okay, so let's go to Q&A action. We'll do that. So if you do have some questions for Nicole, pop them into the virtual chat. And then we'll also start visiting classrooms who are live in camera spots. So let's see, where should we go first? Let's go to Listwall. We've got some grade 6-7s in Listwall with Miss Johnston. Let me pop them into the call. Hey, 6-7s, how are we doing today? Good. All right, who's got a question for us?
So do you ever get scared in space? And if so, what happened that made you scared?
Wow, do you ever get scared in space? I think the entire time you're in space, you're you're like hyper aware almost. I don't know that I'd call it scared, but you've trained so much on the ground for all these things that we know could possibly go wrong or that we think might go wrong. And I think the thing that helps you not be scared is that you've done that. You've trained with your crew, you know how you're going to work together, and in whatever humanly possible way, you really feel good that you'll be able to deal with it. But I'll tell you, the one thing that scared me had nothing to do with me in space. It had to do with the fact that I was in space and my son, who was 7 years old when I flew the first time, was down on Earth. And if anything happened to him, I wouldn't be able to get to him. So as a parent, I think no matter where you are, that's kind of a frightening thought. And so that was the kind of thing that worried me more than what was going on with us in space. If that makes sense, I hope.
All right, great question. That makes total sense. That would, having kids myself, I know that would definitely be something on my mind. And yeah, it's just not a quick process to get back home.
No, and I mean, I'm sure where you've gone too, like out in the wilderness and places, and just here in these otherworldly places on Earth, the same, or just even being on a business trip somewhere, the same kind of thing, happens. It's part of who we are as parents. But that doesn't mean there's not stuff that goes on that doesn't worry you, or like when a fire alarm or a depressurization alarm goes off on the space station. You're using your adrenaline for good until you get the problem solved. And then after that, you can kind of think about it and reflect on it. But yeah, being prepared, that proper planning thing is a good idea.
Yep. All right. We're going to head to Maine, where we have a whole bunch of fourth graders hanging out with us. And I bet they're pretty loud. So I'm going to bring them in. Let's see how they're doing today. Hey, fourth graders.
Oh, wait,
Can you ask your question?
How does the bottom of the sea relate to the surface of the moon?
Wow, great question. You know, one of
So
the best training, actually, I would say the best training I did for what it was going to be like overall, like the place that you're living, how you have to interact with your environment, how you have to take care of your crew and your spaceship, was to go and live underwater in what we call the Aquarius habitat, like the school bus sized habitat that's on the floor of the ocean. And the reason why we do that is because it is so much alike. I mean, it's so different, right? You know, to be in the vacuum of space versus underwater. But the way we as humans have to live in those places is very much the same. Like imagine on your spaceship or on the moon or underwater, you can't just go out like walk around without special equipment on, right? You have to have special equipment on to be able to live and breathe and work in that place. You're in a relatively confined space. You know, our spaceships, and even early when we go back to the moon, it's going to be small places that we're living in with our crew. Same thing when you go and live under the ocean. And there's just so much that requires you to think about how, what our life support system is and how we stay alive in those places, that it's a perfect comparison to prepare us. And I guess I would argue that going to space might also help you if you're going to go undersea and do exploration like that too, and live there for an extended period of time, which I hope is going to happen more in our future, where we're going to be spending more time under the water as well.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, fourth graders, we're going to come back your way. So get another question ready. Let's grab something quickly online before we go to another camera classroom. There's lots of great questions coming in online, but this one's from New York. This is an interesting one. Were you restricted in some of the art supplies you could bring because of weight?
Yes, and the weight actually ended up being the easy part of it, you know, because usually like little paint kits, you know, you wanted to do something small to begin with, because the little bag that I had to take up personal items with was little. And so it had to be small, and I knew, you know, what I wanted to do probably wasn't going to weigh a lot, but I wouldn't have been able to bring something like oil paints or inks or something that would splatter out and make a big mess if I didn't contain it. And so things like that. And the oil paint really is because it's got, you know, chemicals in it that will off gas and that you'll smell and breathe in the confined space. And anything we bring to the space station, whether it's our clothing, our art supplies, our toiletries, everything has to be able to, whatever it does in the space, if it's got chemicals or things that smell, it's got to be cleaned out of the atmosphere. And our system up there can't clean everything out. So we're restricted, really restricted in what we can bring to the station because of that. But weight for sure. And just fortunately, the art supplies I wanted to bring didn't weigh a whole lot anyway.
All right. Awesome. Great question from online. We'll grab a couple more in a few minutes. Let's go to Eden Prairie, Minnesota now. Miss Oak's crew is hanging out with us. Let's bring them in. Hey, Minnesota.
What's the hardest thing to do in space with other people?
What's the hardest thing to do in space? With what, you know what the hardest thing to do in space is? And you're going to think this is funny, but it's to keep track of your stuff. That's the hardest thing to do in space, because whether you're out on a spacewalk, you know, in your spacesuit and you've got your tools, or whether you're inside doing an experiment or just putting stuff away, everything floats. And so it's really hard to keep track of your stuff.
All right. Great question. We're going to go to another class now. Let's bring them up. Where are they hiding in my list? This is Miss G's crew. Let me bring them in live. Hey, Miss G's class, how are we doing today?
It's you guys.
Hi.
Where's your class joining us from today?
Montague, Ontario. Smith Falls, Ontario.
All right. Very cool. Let's grab a question.
How long did your schooling take?
Well, you know, I feel like I'm still doing schooling all the time, you know, and I hope you'll feel that way in some way. I know school, sometimes you're like, you know, how long am I going to be in school? But it's so awesome to just be learning all the time. I think that's what exploration is all about, right? Is learning something new. But I went through high school, which was 12 years. And then I did 6 years of college. So what is that? 18 years, I guess, of school with a bachelor's degree and then a master's degree. And I'll tell you what, right now, I know you're thinking, wow, 18 years, that's a long time. It goes by so fast. You will look back and think, how did I think 18 years was going to be a long time? But what's cool is, all of the people that are in the astronaut office, and this is true for most things, all of us wanted at some point decided, man, I'd really like to be an astronaut. And so we learned what the basic requirements in school were for that. But if I were to show you a picture of my astronaut class, there's 17 people in that picture. Not one of us got there the same way. And so we all had pursued these things we loved and were interested in and curious about. And it ended up allowing us to get to that same place. But we had oceanographers, geophysicists, engineers, fighter pilots, test pilots, medical doctors, all these kinds of things that you can study and do to be qualified to apply to be an astronaut. And and then on top of that, all those people have really cool hobbies and other stuff that they do that make them really wonderful crewmates too. So so think about that, all those things you enjoy that drive ultimately what you want to study in school, but also how you're enjoying life around that as well. Yeah.
All right, great question. So there's so many questions coming in online. I'm going to throw two in your direction, Nicole.
Okay.
This first one here is from a grade 7-8 class in Erin, and they would like to know what it was like your first time in space. And then we're going to follow that up with one from Mr. Lineback's grade 6s. And this is a question students always want to know, whether you're rowing across an ocean or exploring caves in space. What is the bathroom process like?
I didn't even know what you were going to say there. I had no idea. It is. And I don't care how old you are. You want to know the answer to that question. Well, I can tell you my first time in space was awesome. The second time was awesome. I highly recommend it. There's something, I don't know, so liberating and peaceful and new every time too about being in a place like that. But I'll tell you, I feel that same way down here on Earth when when I'm in a new place, or even in my own backyard. Sometimes if I really open up my heart, my mind to the awe and wonder that's around me all the time, the word awesome definitely comes to mind. The bathroom in space, it's awesome in its own way too. And I always joke that it's all about the vacuum of space when it comes to going to the bathroom in space. And that's because we do use vacuum, like a vacuum hose, to help pull. Like if I'm going to use number 1 and number 2. So number 1, everyone, there's this long hose with a yellow funnel on the end of it. When you need to go, you go in, you kind of float around this hose. You turn on a switch and this vacuum starts in the hose. And then just like number 1 or number 2, which is basically in a can, just like camping, it's all about aim and speed. And it is very different to what we do down here on Earth. But I kind of looked at it like it was all part of the adventure. Like you don't want everything to be exactly the same as the way it is down here on Earth. And so there's my dog barking in the background. It's part of that whole side of exploration that puts us in these different places and then requires us to do the things we think are just normal parts of our lives in different ways too. It was fun.
All right. I can only imagine, but it is kind of an exciting time because more and more people are getting that opportunity to experience leaving our planet and get that view where you really kind of see how small our planet is, how thin that atmosphere is, and there's no country lines when you're looking back down.
That is true.
On Earth. Okay, well, we'll squeeze in a few more questions from some of our camera groups. Let's go back to our auditorium of 4th graders in Maine and see if they have another question for us.
If you had to choose, would you choose space or the ocean?
Oh, wow. That's not a fair question. I think I probably would end up choosing the ocean, because my favorite planet is Earth, and this is where I really want to live. So I think I'd choose the ocean. But I highly recommend space if you get the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Right. Great question. Let's see. Mrs. G's class, do you guys want to ask another question?
We sure do. Just 1 second while she comes up. Sorry. You're not on it. Can I ask your question? Go ahead.
Is it possible to boil water in space?
It is, and that's because inside of our spaceships, so I'll give you two answers, and they're both it is. Inside of our spaceship, we have it pressurized, so it's just like what you're experiencing right now in your classroom, right? So you can wear normal clothes, everything is essentially the same except you're floating. And so we can boil water inside the space station, but think about the vacuum of space too. What's interesting about it is if you put water out in the vacuum of space, it's going to almost instantaneously boil. It's why we don't go outside without spacesuits on, because our bodies are mostly water. It's one of the reasons why we have to protect ourselves that way in the vacuum of space. So in that vacuum environment, something will boil to where it vaporizes. And so the answer is yes.
All right. Minnesota. Do you have another question?
What inspired you to draw what you saw in space, and what did you see?
Wow. I always loved artsy, craftsy kinds of things. I really was excited about being able to bring a watercolor kit with me to space. I'm thankful to my friend Mary Jane Anderson, who was the one who helped me pack all my stuff. And she's the one who reminded me, man, Nicole, you're going to be living there for an extended period of time. Take something with you that you enjoy doing down here on Earth. And so I think for me, the greatest inspiration for my artwork was the opportunity to see Earth as our home planet, and the beauty of it. And again, the awe and wonder of it, and be able in my own way to try to capture that through my artwork. And even down here on Earth, if I'm doing my own art, that's what I'll do. I'll go look for a picture I took from space to be my inspiration. In fact, I call the folder on my computer is called Inspiration Photos. And it's mostly pictures that I really loved that I took of Earth from space. And then I do some that are of like launch and the space station as we saw it, as we were approaching and things. But mostly the inspiration is our Earth.
All right. We're going to squeeze in one more question from online here.
Okay.
Let's see. Mr. Romero's class, they would like to know food. How much food has to be brought up to the space station each time?
Wow, lots of food. And on the space station, we rely on, that's one of the few things now that we rely on being resupplied consistently from Earth to us is food from Earth. And but that's not going to be able to be the case when we're traveling to Mars, right? Where we're not going to be resupplying anything. Whatever we have on that spaceship is going to be what we have to have with us when we're traveling to Mars. So I'm counting on all, the kids, you guys in your classrooms to really be thinking creatively about food and how food can be formed and nutritious, but in a totally different way. But all the food is being sent up and resupplied. But what I'll say is we're in this international partnership. We have a really wonderful mix of foods from all the countries, and it tastes good. And yeah, so it's just very different to what we eat down here. It's mostly like camping food, but that's okay. It's good.
All right. And I overlooked Mrs. Johnson's class for a second question. So if you have one handy, Mrs. Johnson's crew, we'll let you have the final question.
We do. Thank you. Hi.
Hi.
What inspired you to become an astronaut?
Oh, great question. When I look back, I think my inspiration just overall came from, and I'm very thankful for this, from parents who shared what they loved with me. And I can tell you, my husband and I are trying to do that with our son too, is just they just like shared what they loved. And my dad built and flew small airplanes. I grew up hanging out at an airport, loving flying, but in the end, really wanting to know how things fly. And I think that just keeping that in mind, like, oh man, I just really want to, I want to fly on things, but I want to know how things fly. And that's how I chose what I did at school, studied at university. And then while I was there, I'm like, man, if you want to know how airplanes fly, why would you not want to know how rocket ships fly? And it all kind of like led down this path of, seeing more and more, working as an engineer for NASA on the Space Shuttle program, and seeing astronauts come through and because it took me a long time to think about astronaut as even a possibility, because I always thought astronaut was one of those things that only other special people get to do. But I realized that most of what astronauts do is not flying in space, probably 99.9% of it. And a lot of it was like I was already doing as an engineer. And that gave me the confidence to at least consider applying. And then I had mentors that were like my teachers and that I still kept in touch with. And some of the people I really trusted that I worked with on the Space Shuttle program that just encouraged me to pick up the pen and apply, to do the one thing I had total control of. And I am so thankful to them for that. But the inspiration really came from paying attention to what I was curious about and wanted to know more about.
All right. Well, Nicole, if you're okay with it, we sometimes do a little Padlet after the events when there's lots and lots of questions.
Okay.
So the Padlet teachers can hop on there, put a couple questions in from their students, and I can share the link with you maybe tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then if you want to answer a few questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to.
Perfect. So I'm going to share the link to the Padlet, padlet.com. You can see it there, / our initials, EPSWIPE, exploring by the seat of your pants, / Nicole. So I'll leave that up for a minute. And of course, you can go back to the recording and you can grab it there. And maybe while I'm thinking of it, I will paste it into the chat. That should open there. And I'll paste in the private chat as well for the teachers who are on camera. And Nicole, I'll share that link with you so you're able to answer a few of those.
Okay, cool.
Well, Nicole, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
For starting off our space events. A huge shout out to our classrooms for being with us. And maybe what we'll do just to wrap up is let's get things loud in here with the classrooms still hanging out with us. All right. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great rest of the week. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.